America was founded, yes, as the democratic experiment, but it was founded on stolen land with stolen labor. So if that is the foundation of your country, then the folks who built it are going to be focused always on their own power. How they keep it, how they hoard it, how they maintain it at all costs, and how they make sure nobody else has any access to power of their own. Because if those folks get access to power, then they're gonna overthrow you. So after emancipation, we have a period of Reconstruction that's supposed to knit the country back together by, in part, making sure that formerly enslaved people have rights similar to those of American citizens. So then Jim Crow comes along and says, oh, y'all got some Negroes in Congress. We're not doing that, right? So let's go ahead and make sure that not only can you never run for Congress, but that the people who would have put you in Congress can't vote for you. And then we're going to ensure that there's a system of racial terror. So that system of racial terror was there to tell us to stay in our place. Don't bother trying to vote. Don't bother trying to own your own business. That even though enslavement is over, you are still to be a second-class citizen.
Theodore Bilbo was a senator from Mississippi, and he had been governor of Mississippi before that. He was probably one of the most rabid white supremacists that's ever sat in the U.S. Senate from the South. He wrote a book which said that Black Americans were certainly inferior. I'm not sure he said the Great Replacement Theory. That's what the descendants of Bilbo, the white supremacists of today, call it. He said he feared most of all miscegenation, which of course would be whites and blacks cohabitating and producing children who he would disdainfully call mulattoes.
The core idea, essentially, is that non-white people are going to take over the US and take away white power. Basically, that there is a threat to white power institutions in America.
He said, if you don't know how to keep, and I'm not going to say the word he used, but if you don't know how to keep a black person from voting, and then he winked, and he said, you see them the night before.
I've known Barry Goldwater for a long time. When I hear people say he's impulsive and such nonsense, I boil over.
But when we come to Senator Goldwater,
when he says that only the strong can remain free, he knows what he's talking about.
Now it seems to me we're up against a very different kind of a man. This man scares me.
Believe me, if it weren't for Barry keeping those boys in Washington on their toes, do you honestly think our national defense would be as strong as it is?
White people in America, by and large, are becoming increasingly conservative and also very militantly against the fast pace that they think that our people are pressing them toward. So Goldwater stands a better chance than a whole lot of people think.
When the head of the Ku Klux Klan, when all these weird groups come out in favor of the candidate of my party, either they're not Republicans or I'm not.
George Wallace, who had been the segregationist governor of Alabama, was a rigid segregationist. He didn't mind using nasty language.
The last state of the Deep South to resist integration at schools. And the governor of a southern state said, no Negro shall be admitted to an otherwise white enrollment.
In 1968, he ran for president on the independent ticket. And he would have rallies that I have to say foreshadowed the rallies in 2016 of Donald Trump. His rallies brought people who were angry, who were racist, who didn't mind if he said crude and vicious things about young people and demonstrators and African Americans. He was kind of a bully. Richard Nixon got a majority of the electoral votes. He got some votes in the South. George Wallace not only got some Southern state votes, but he took away votes from Democrats in northern states that had previously gone to the Democratic presidential candidates. He took them away so that Humphrey didn't get those votes and Nixon could get a majority in the electoral college from those states. Between the two, in 1968, they were able to get enough votes to shift away from the Democrat, Hubert Humphrey, to Richard Nixon.
So help me God.
You contrast that to 1968, Richard Nixon at the time was seen as a loser. He had lost in 60, he had lost in 62 when he ran for governor in California.
Richard Nixon has been trying to be president for a good little minute by then. 12 years before that, he finds himself in the first televised presidential debate getting mollywopped by JFK. The guy who got embarrassed on national television and who's desperately wanted to be in this single seat of power is the perfect guy to say, hey, if you just carry the water of white supremacy and you just stick closely to the script, we will make your dreams come true.
For 1968, when the Republicans meet in Miami Beach, Richard Milhouse Nixon has come out of retirement, swept to victory in a number of presidential primaries, and is now the first ballot nominee of his party.
12 years later, when you thought it was all over, when you thought you were too old, you never were gonna have another chance, you got it.
Richard Nixon never used, the words directly of racism and segregation. He never used those words. He used substitutes, dog whistles as they were called. He stood for law and order, he said, which he really meant the law and disorder of both African Americans through the urban rioting and the student and young protesters campaigning against the Vietnam War.
People who have been pushed out to the margins by the powerful few, when those folks find a little power and we make a little progress, the intent then always by the powerful is to make sure that we don't get too big for our britches. That we don't ever get too far down the road toward our own freedom, because that spells jeopardy for them and their power. And so there's always a backlash whenever marginalized people, Black folks in particular, make progress in this country.